harsh realities of being 55 years of age. Things like you go to way more funerals these days than weddings. You're getting older, you don't feel like you once did, and by the time you're done work or the end of the day, you pretty much crash. Whereas 20 years ago, you could get up and go for a big bike ride. Things have changed. Things have changed drastically. And what I'm realizing now in my 50s and certainly 55 years old, there's some harsh realities that I experienced. Things that, once never mattered and now really is hitting close to home. Let's break this down because there are some things that really do matter. And I know a lot of you out there are in my type of demographic. Some of you are 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And certainly as I look at my my analytics, I see that. I see the vast majority of people that are watching my content is similar to me. Some are working, some aren't. Some are debating retiring, quitting. And that has never been ever a regret. That is one of the biggest wins for me in my life in the recent years. But there's some harsh realities of being 55, and I want to talk about that. The first one is the vast majority of you, and I can attest, I'm no longer working, and I can attest I'm no longer working, but most people have pretty much peaked. They're not going to be working in the same way. They're not going to have the same opportunities. They're not going to have the same jobs. And most people, by the time they're, in their 50s, if you haven't been dealt the hand of ageism, at the very least, if you're working in your current job, which I was, you're pretty much seen your peak. If you haven't made it to where you wanted to make it in your career, there's an extremely low likelihood of you possibly making that top senior executive role or that premier position or getting that top promotion that you always dreamed of. And if you're continuing to clamor and claw at those opportunities, and if you are still working, there's a high probability at this age that's probably never going to happen. Now, I'm not going to say don't make your own destiny because I truly believe in that. And I've always been an optimist in a way that, I make my own future, I make my own life, and I make my own future. I basically create my own destiny. But you know what? There are realities. And while I'm an optimist, I'm also a realist. And so then, you probably won't do it in a business and a job environment you're in now. At 55, if you're still working, you're probably leveling off. And at the very least, you're probably just hunkered down in for the long haul and preparing for either retirement, getting that tap on the shoulder to say sayonara for a package, or in fact, the rest of the company sees you in a way that, well, let's just give them something easy and stable, and you're likely not going to be up for the next big promotion. That's just a harsh reality. As there are always exceptions, and certainly if anybody's got any exceptions, please do drop that down in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. But there's very few people that I've ever experienced seeing big promotions by the time they're in their mid-50s. And the reality is they realize that most companies, especially in the corporate space, generally don't see somebody in their mid-50s as providing extra value, as high performing, as energetic. Rather, they're always looking for the up-and-comers. They're always looking for somebody who, maybe is a real push, go-getter. Maybe somebody in their 30s that has just enough experience to get going, but not too much age under the belt that they still have some time. And so this is one big reality that I've come to. Now, I've done other things and, side hustles and social media programs, and certainly side business entrepreneurship can certainly create new situations for you. So it's not all over. You can even go subcontract, possibly come back as a consultant, and there's lots of great opportunities. But as you get into your 50s, and one of that harsh reality is you have to start developing your own opportunities, because most companies don't see us as providing the value. Most companies don't see us at 55 or 50 having, providing the value that they're looking for. Rather, they're just looking for somebody that's, a little bit lower cost, and certainly lower on the totem pole. So that's one thing that I've noticed, and certainly a lot of you out there will probably have experienced it. Now, another thing that I want to comment about is another one of the harsh realities is once you're 55, and certainly that's where I'm at today, it's, as they say, it's all downhill from here. But that being said, I look at it as a new beginning. Some people see this as you're over the hill or you're over the top or it's all downhill from here. And those are all common phrases, and we all sort of settle in and assume and have that expectation that it's all over. It's not. It really doesn't have to be that way. And really, I mean, are you a product of your environment? A lot of people fall into that trap and start settling into, kind of do the easy and the slow, and I better slow it down because I'm old. Well, I'm not old technically, but that's an assumption. But there's a harsh reality. There is a numbers game, and the numbers game is going against us. And that's something that I have realized more and more. When you think about being 55, if you say the average life expectancy is somewhere around 75, 80, well, you've probably spent 2/3 to 3/4 of your life behind you. I've spoken about that hourglass, and you flip that up, you can't defeat the grains of sand that are in the bottom. That's just what they are. That's the time that's passed, and you can't turn it around. So with that said, one of the harsh realities is we aren't getting any younger. But that is a harsh reality, but that should not stop us. See, because the way I see this, if anything, and I look at that as an inspiration, I look at that, it's time to really buckle down and get her done and have some fun. Enjoy my time, with those friends and doing those things I want to do. So this to me was more of a wake-up call, this aha moment. And even though it's a harsh reality of being older, it's also a situation that helps me believe or trust in what I can do and the life that I can even lead for myself. So while it's a harsh reality, the fact remains is use that next 20, 25 years, 30 years, maybe 35 years, and use it wisely. Use it in a way that's going to help you enjoy and maximize your life. Get the best out of life. I heard yesterday somebody that I know that, their parents they had a slip on the weekend, cracked a hip, had to go in for surgery, and there was a discussion. Already heard that, I don't know what the ratio and the odds are, I'm not a doctor, but the odds are quite low. I think it's 50-50, survival in those kind of circumstances. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, people that unfortunately have those kind of accidents are more likely those that have been out there enjoying life. And you don't want to go hang gliding or skydiving necessarily at 85 or playing contact hockey. The fact is there's lots of great things that a lot of us can do and enjoy, and spending time with people that we like hanging around with. So while yes, in fact, the majority of our life is now behind us, it should in fact be a bit of an eye-opener for those people thinking, there's what's left. There's nothing left. And people that get sort of caught up in this work environment thinking, as long as I keep working till 67, 70, it's almost like putting a set of horse blinders on. It's almost making those assumptions that, as long as I keep working, I'm not getting any older, or I don't have to face my mortality. Well, I'll tell you this much right now. Who wants to die Well, the way I see this, who wants to die at their desk? Not me. And I didn't even want to be anywhere close to that, because at the end of the day, I wanted to enjoy the last third of my life. Being a kid, I really enjoyed my life. Then the second third of my life, I enjoyed building a life, a family, enjoying some of the experiences, because that's now where you have some of the wealth and the money and the cash flow and the resources to do that. So that's where you experience the world and travel and fun and cars and passion and hobbies and people, and you enjoy all of that. But it comes at a cost, so therefore you have to continue working and building that life. But now that's done. I've seen a lot of those things that I've always wanted to see or do. And so now it's more of a time to actually enjoy. Think back, revel in some of those experiences. Share it with, my young ones. Maybe continue experiencing some of those things. But the ones that are, more physically involved, maybe those ones can wait. Maybe I don't worry as much of that stuff, or possibly don't do them at all. What I'm really saying here is, in this long jibber jabber, is the fact that the harsh reality is we're on our last legs, but don't let it get you down. Let it be a motivator for what you do in the last third of your life. Another harsh reality is you simply don't have a ton of friends, and at 55 years of age, I can totally attest. This is something that I've been experiencing in the last little while, and well, my focus hasn't necessarily been on building friendship. I haven't been pushing people away. That said, my priorities have been primarily focusing on sort of self-healing and, getting past the loss of parents, getting past dealing with some of those estate issues, helping still, of course, support the growth of my young ones, and of course, spending a little bit more quality time with my wife, and doing a lot of those things that I want to do and I need to do. And a lot of it is self-healing. And there is a harsh reality. A lot of us will go through this, and a lot of us quite often find ourselves not having those friends around us anymore. And when you are going through those tough times, I went through more than my share of challenging times. And I mean, I've spoken about this actually quite a amount. If you go back in the channel and some of the OGs from back about a year ago, you can probably relate and understand some of the things I went through, about how I lost my job in February of 24. Then I lost my mother in March of 24. And then, of course, lots going on at home, and changes and impacts, and a lot of stress, of course, and, losing my father back in 21. It's been really a snowball effect. So it has been a whole collection of challenges. But moving forward, I'm finally starting to feel as though some of the healing is done now. I'm starting to feel like I'm starting to hit, that 38,000 feet and now cruising at that jet stream, because, a lot of that is done. I've got closure on some things, and some of the mourning is well underway, and there's certainly a lot of those things behind me. But for quite a while, and a lot of us will all go through this, loss. Everybody deals with that and deals with it in their own way. But a lot of times it just basically means that you're going to have to manage your way and navigate life in your own way. And sometimes friends, the ones that really matter, will be there for you. And it's a really hard slap in the face by a cold, wet fish, that the good friends are much fewer and far between than you actually could imagine. A lot of them don't want to see you wallow. A lot of them don't want any part of it. A lot of them just don't care, never have. And most people are just simply acquaintances. But what I have realized is there's not too many true friends around. And so there is an optimistic component here. What I have realized is there have been more people in my space. I bumped into that gentleman yesterday. I said, grabbing a coffee. And so what you start to realize is, once you're in a better state of mind, and you've got, now more time, and you're feeling a little more positive and optimistic, you can start to actually meet people that share common interests, share commonalities. And it was funny because, this gentleman yesterday that I spoke of, he was 62 years of age. And he had mentioned to me yesterday, he looks at me, and I'm wearing my shorts and my giddy up like this, clearly in sandals and shorts. And a guy that looks like might still be working. And he says to me, he looks at me, he grabbed his coffee. I was waiting for my coffee. And he looks and he laughs and he says, "Oh, heading off to work, are you?" And then I kind of chuckle. He said, "Well, no, not really. I'm basically retired." And I told him, what I do, a little bit of social media on the side. And, I've got a bit of a side hustle that does kind of keep me busy and active. But he ended up opening up and start chatting about how he was, he was previously a paramedic. He got into the trades, got his ticket, and started doing something different. And he's only doing 2-3 days a week, and he's enjoying it. So now what I realize is there's more and more people out there that are like-minded, that are looking for that second lease on life, that are looking for other things that are better things. And people, when you actually open up, your eyes, and you're positive, and you become more approachable, people find that, and people enact and engage with that. And this is what I found. He totally engaged, because I must have had that relaxed look on my face. I was pretty chill. I was looking almost like I was heading to the beach. And you know what? It got him chatting, talking. And all I'm saying is, when you get to that point where you're finally getting past some of those challenges in life, like I had seen, I've been gone through, you finally get to the point where a lot of the mourning is done. A lot of the bows have been tied. You have a lot of the closure has come and gone now, and now you're actually truly starting to enjoy that third component of your life. I think other people start to sense that energy, and that energy starts to come out in a way that just it exudes that positivity, that relaxation, that attitude, the overall look and persona that you carry often Now people pick up on that. And also other things that you can do and think about is maybe get into other, other sports, possibly other activities that many other people are into. You want to get into things like, I use the term pickleball. That's quite funny. That's an easy default. I'm not much of a pickleball person myself, but a lot of people can get into that. They can get into a lot of sports. Racquetball. I grabbed a set of rackets. Even me and my spouse, we got her a new racket. I used to play competitively many years ago in tournaments and such. But now you can get back into some of those things maybe that you put on hold years ago. And so me and my spouse went out. Now you can get into events like that and possibly meet people in those environments. Maybe take up swimming, take up things like that, cycling, go to the gym. And it doesn't matter. There's lots of things that can both, keep you in good shape and help you meet other people that are also like-minded. So ultimately, it's a situation where once you get past that, you can actually enjoy it. But know that to that point, quite often, once you retire and in your 50s, your group of friends or those friends you think are actual friends are very, very few and far between. Friends, we don't really have a whole lot of them. And even those ones we might meet in like-minded environments quite often are there for the same reason, doing something that you both like to do. And outside of that, there's a good chance that they're on their way, you're on your way. And so you just go back and enjoy your solo lifestyle. Another harsh reality, once you're in your 50s, and certainly at 55, I'm starting to see it more and more, is your health is not the way it used to be. There are things that you can impact, and I've been working on trying to fix some of that myself. And a lot of you take on, say, different diets, keto or paleo diets or carnivore diets. And I hate even the word diet. Like it just irks me because that's not necessarily the way I've ever grown up. I just truly believe in living a healthy lifestyle. That's where I come from. So living a healthy lifestyle looks to me like, eating right and getting good exercise, getting a decent amount of rest, and avoiding some of the bad habits, smoking, drinking, obviously the DNA situation, just avoiding all of that. But in doing that, that helps prolong things. But there's a harsh reality at 55 that things just don't always, aren't always going to be the same as they were when you were 25. You do have these aches, you do have these strange pains, you do have to go to the doctor from time to time for some ailment. Your teeth aren't necessarily in the same condition. You bite a nut and all of a sudden you break a teeth and you're like, I used to have great teeth, but now I don't. So there's lots of things that change with age. And unfortunately, a harsh reality is you really can't turn that clock back. I mean, we're all gonna deal with this at some point. So the best thing that I find is not focusing so much on the reality of that, because that is a reality. Take it one step at a time, one little challenge at a time. Like they say, baby steps. You could sit there and dwell, and I know a lot of people that are like literal hypochondriacs, and they will literally go to the doctor for every little sniffle, little gas pain, little everything. And they'll head to the doctor, take up time, their dime, doctor's time. And well, I don't want to dissuade people from checking in on things that could be more serious. Certainly, you want to make sure that if you've got a real problem or something that seems to be really nagging, you probably want to have it checked out. But what I'm trying to get at is it's a reality. It's a reality that things are starting to wear out and break down, and it's no different than buying a new car. It's wonderful when it's new. It's like you at 20 years of age. But by the time that car's got, 180,000 miles on it, which is kind of like us, say we're at 180,000 miles, it still might run well. It might burn a wee bit of oil. I've had cars that they're perfect. They're awesome. But you always got to put that extra half quart every couple of weeks, just to keep them on the road. They have a little fussy when their cold starts. And there's just that car that just, it's not perfect. The power window cranks up really slowly, and the headlight's a little dim. And there's things that just aren't right. Well, that's like us. My headlight's a little dim sometimes. Sometimes I'm a little slow on the get-go. I mean, we all have those things. So what I'm trying to get at is accept it. This is age, and embrace it. But if you have a problem, deal with it. Certainly get it looked at, deal with it. Don't wallow too long. But again, there is that fine line. And I've seen people that literally will spend all their waking days going to clinics and doctors chasing ghosts. And this is just something that I used to be a little bit like that. I used to be a little bit, if you're Portuguese, here's a word for you, schmod. So if you're I was a little schmod back in the day. You know, I was a little bit hypersensitive to, physical ailments in my 20s and 30s. And my doctor would look at me, run a bunch of tests and laugh. And he said, just go enjoy, get exercise, have fun, and live life. And that was the conversation every single time. And it got to the point where it's like, whatever. And then I realized that, I'm going to spend my life and I'm going to live it, but I'm going to live it in a healthy way. And so that's all I can say is, when you realize your age isn't or your physical abilities and your health is not as good at 55, it's true. It's generally not. But let's try to, work on that. Like right here. See, that's a situation. You get an older gentleman who's like in his 90s or 80s. I just saw him as he rolled by. He's on his bike riding along. That's all you got to do. Look after your health. Eat a little bit better. You can make some wholesale changes that make you feel a little better too. And that's all I'm trying to realize is that while there's a harsh reality, there is ways that we can help ourselves. There's another harsh reality. Now that at 55, I realize I'm just loaded with candor. Yeah, I speak my mind. And honestly, some people call it harsh. Some people call it, say I have a lot of attitude. But I think that, we go through our lives, caring too much what other people think. And for a long time, I was a people pleaser, and many of us are. You work at your job and you get used to these. You get indoctrinated and ingrained in you that you have to be this most polite person, this ideal worker that has to basically, just say yes to everything and be polite and agree and be totally agreeable. But I'll be totally frank with you. After working that space for 35 years, while some of it just comes naturally, because that's a big part of just interaction with humans around us, and that's being polite, treating people respectfully, and treating people, with integrity and all of that. Those are very important attributes. But I would never, and I would never ever suggest or imply or tell anybody not to treat anybody respectfully, because we should all realistically treat others the way that we would expect or hope to be treated by others too. So here's sort of in a long roundabout way, treat others respectfully first off. But at 55, I'm also realizing, after years of basically, I don't know what the term is, but just being that ideal worker, and I could say bag licking, if you will. I mean, that's a harsh term, but that's a term that we can all recognize in the job space. Those bag lickers, so to speak, it just gets a bit much. And after years of doing that, it's just something that just does not resonate well with me anymore. I'll treat the supervisor, I'll treat a coworker, a peer, a report, all respectfully, to the point where, I almost go well above and beyond, and I typically have, I'll almost go to an exaggerated amount. And that's for the people that have, shown the same grace and have shown the same level of integrity and respect for me. But you flip the table, and now you have to say the same thing, and you have to pretend, and you have to do all those niceties for a manager or a boss that, let's be honest, haven't shown you the same respect, haven't given you the same, treatment. Maybe they've isolated you and possibly treated you in a less than favorable manner and passed you up on promotions and essentially turned the other cheek, and clearly have even, the microaggressions in meetings, which I've experienced as well, by the way. It's those microaggressions you start picking up on, And those managers and those bosses that do that, and yet you still have to put on a smiley face because you want to keep your job. You want to make sure that you're not going to be on that next line or that next list for layoffs or part of the restructuring plan. You want to make sure you have a job because most people have to pay the bills. So you go through this life talking and treating people, the good ones, in a way that you'd like to be treated. But the worst part is you also treating those that aren't treating you well in the same way. And now you're in a situation where you start resenting. You start resenting yourself. You start resenting everybody around you, your boss. And you really start, looking at your job as like, why am I doing this? I don't respect myself anymore because I have to be nice to this person because they're my boss, they sign my checks. And a lot of us can relate to that it just doesn't feel right inside. We're not wired that way to be good with it. I know some people like that, but then they get angry and they get bitter. And honestly, I was starting to get a little angry and bitter too. But I'll tell you, at 55, a harsh reality, some people recognizing now that I'm speaking my mind. Because people like that no longer are going to walk through my life, blow in and blow out, and treat me in a certain way that's far less than favorable, and have me not address the situation. Because that's exactly what I do now. I address any situation, verbally or otherwise, that isn't necessarily respectful. I mean, we all just need to get along. We all should just help each other out and uplift each other and not bring ourselves down. So people that aren't uplifting, rather they're trying to take a chunk out of you, I'm going to let them know what I think about that. And I'm not okay with that. And I think the more that the older we get, and certainly at 55, that's how I am. Certainly a lot more candor. And it's not about speaking your mind and being belligerent and obnoxious and being just plain rude. Not at all. Because those that are treating us respectfully as humans and peers and people around us, they're going to get every ounce of respect and appreciation from me. And they do. But you know what? Why should we go through this life? Life's short. And listen to other people maybe make these subtle jokes about us and then say, haha, just kidding. Because we know that people that say that kind of stuff, they say, oh, no offense, but your hair looks funny. No offense, but you talk funny. They'll line it up with no offense, but you've just offended me by saying that. So then why did you say no offense? Because people that say that clearly are offending you, and clearly people sometimes just do not respect you, and they want to say their thing, and they think they can slide it in there in a passive-aggressive way, and then you're going to be okay with that. What I've realized at 55 is people have a lot of different ways of interaction. Some of it's very positive, some of it's not. All I'm saying is at 55, I've learned to be much more candid. I'll address conversation issues, things that I maybe have issues with. We'll have a chat. And I'll say, you know what, I'm not okay with that. That's not something that I appreciate. And so I'd appreciate if you don't say that again. Just be straight up. Be more front and center with that and address it head on. That's all I'm saying. That's something now that I've realized with some age, and now at 55, a harsh reality is I'm going to tell you the way it is. Another harsh reality at 55, you do start to recognize that money doesn't matter. Not really. I mean, I'll ask you this question. Do you have enough money to eat? Do you have enough money to live? Like, do you have a roof over your head? And are you able to go to a movie maybe once in a while, and maybe go out to eat a couple times or once or twice a week just to enjoy and celebrate with your better half? I mean, if you say yes to all of those, how much more money do you need? So if you budget yourself in a way that will allow that lifestyle, then that's really all you need. And once you're 55, 60, 65, I get it. Money's tight these days. Inflation's chewing away. We don't have the buying power that we did before. So I totally get it when a lot of people say that They don't have the money. They have to keep working. They have to keep working. They have to keep working. But I also know a lot of people that keep doing it because it's old hat, old routine. They like the grind. They like the hustle. They like where they work. But more importantly, they like the big paycheck. And they never really have a set end date of retirement, or, they just keep on keeping on and for no real goal in mind other than just to continue working. It's those are the people right there that should, I'm going to be totally frank, should maybe move over the way a little. Just maybe think about, do you have the money and the resources? Do you have vetted pension? Do you have, a pile of money in the bank, 401ks and stocks and, RRSPs and TFSAs and whatever it is, Canadian, US, whatever, and all over the globe, you have your own investment portfolios. But do you have the money to help yourself retire or get out of the way? See, because that's part of the other problem is there was a lot of people hanging around. And I had people in my world like that, bosses that just wouldn't necessarily leave, and they were hanging around. But it doesn't allow, they're well into their 60s with no end date in mind. And then there's lots of people out there looking for work. Now, I know those are senior roles, but, as somebody, moves out in an upper role, middle level moves up into that. Now the lower levels slide in, you get new position, you get rotation. But the more people that keep hanging on for no reason, that doesn't make room for the next generation. And I can attest, I'm not that young worker, but I also have young ones, that are looking at trying to get into workspace. They're looking at, trying to get in a new career, and they're trying to break into the market. But they can realize right now that it's very tough to get a job. And we hear this all over the place. Job hunting is crazy. Unemployment right now in Canada for young people between 15 and 25 is something like 22, 24% across Canada. That's ludicrous. So what's worse than having 20% of the young population bitter with no hope and no job? What do you think that lines up for? What do you think our future looks like at that point? It's not optimistic. So a big part of what we can do is, if we're there, we're there. Let's move over, give the young generation, a chance to maybe move in. And I know it's a controversial topic, because what if you're, say, 58, 59? Is that a good time to get out? Is that when you need to kind of move on? Everybody, it's a little bit different. All I'm saying is, why would I want to jump back in the work market if I'm okay? I've done my things during the years, and I've managed to put my finances in just enough spot, not excessive, but just enough to be able to make a living outside of working for, a corporate game, but not made space for the young workers. I just, I feel like, helping the next generation out. We know it's not going to be easy anyhow, with increased cost of living, houses, inflation, you name it. There's lots of discussion around all over the place right now. And I truly believe this is a hot topic that a lot of people aren't talking about. Well, they actually are. But as part of sort of the retirement conversation, it's a discussion not just about us living our best lives. It's a discussion about, okay, are we ready? Sure. We don't want to cut ourselves short. I don't want to ever suggest that you better jump ship for those reasons and then find yourself broke when you're 73. Definitely do your numbers, run your math and figure it out. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you've got to you have your plan in place. All I'm saying is, for those that, and there's lots of them out there that just don't really want to let go because you sort of like the gig they've got. They're making excessive amounts of money, and realistically, a lot of those people won't make it. I had a boss too, from a few years back that unfortunately passed a year after he retired at 65. So much for hanging on there too, right? And it's unfortunate. It's so sad. It's really eye-opening to me when that happens. When somebody just, they were ready 5 years earlier, but they just kept on hanging on. They just kept doing what they knew best. They'll show up at work at 6 o'clock in the morning and, say good morning to everybody and collect that big paycheck and that bonus every year. And that's, again, it's important for people to have that feeling and that sense of belonging and that sense of having a place to be and that sense of, like this is who I am, this is what I am. But there gets a point where you're going to have to let go of that anyway at some point. And realistically, you know, the longer we hold on, the longer that we prolong the opportunities for the next generation. Anyway, I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know it's a very controversial, hot topic, especially, you know, this whole discussion between, say, boomers moving out for Gen Zs, or even maybe millennials, the new generations that are trying to find work. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. What are your opinions on that? But at the end of the day, I've never regretted a day. There are some harsh realities as a 55-year-old man. I've definitely figured out. Anyway, I hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. And I hope you're having an absolute glorious day. It is beautiful out here today. Another sunny day. I'm going to go grab a coffee. Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful one. See you then. Bye-bye.